I nodded. It was me, and Raheem, and Jenna, and the others they pushed out for being too expensive or too honest. He looked down at the specs in front of him, the same specs I had delivered through the Trevant system 24 hours earlier. "This is clean," he said, "smarter than the version we saw last quarter." "That version had to go through 6 approval layers and 3 branding cycles," I replied. "This one didn't." He closed the folder. "I don't care about politics. I care about resilience. If Trevant delivers, I don't care what the logo says." And that was the entire game. Because clients don't follow brands. They follow people who make the noise stop. I left the meeting with something better than a signature, a nod. The kind of nod that carries weight in rooms where deals are still made by looking someone in the eye. That night, I stayed in a capsule hotel, not for the irony, though it was rich, but because I needed to be somewhere quiet, somewhere I could feel the transition happening without the luxury gloss. I lay there in the narrow bed, blinking up at a curved white ceiling, and smiled, because I knew what was coming next. London, Eurocom, Linda Clark. Now, if Yuki was a blade, Linda was a firewall. She had seen too many contracts, cleaned up too many messes, and outlived too many CEOs to be impressed by anything. But she respected clarity, and I had it. My flight landed in Heathrow to a sky the color of wet paper. I took a cab to a rental flat, no hotels, no check-ins to flag, and reviewed the documentation one more time. Venturon's original agreement had been vague, intentionally so, built for plausible deniability and cross-region stalling tactics. I'd flagged it, they hadn't changed it, so I did. At 11:40 p.m., I opened a secure call with Jenna. She had already uploaded the cleaner contract version we'd been shaping for months. It wasn't fancy, it was functional, exactly what Linda respected. The next morning, I walked into Eurocom with nothing but that file and a black coffee I didn't finish. Linda was already at the table. She didn't smile. "This isn't the standard Venturon language," she said, flipping through the first page. "No," I said, "it's the one that works." She kept reading. By page 3, she was nodding. "You did this?" "Yes, off the record. If you want to pretend it came from legal, I won't stop you." She looked up at me with something close to curiosity. "You ever think about sitting on this side of the table?" "I used to," I said. "Now I think about building the table." There was a flicker in her expression, something rare, respect. When I left the building, the sky hadn't changed, but something else had. I was no longer the envoy. I was the alternative. And that was louder than any announcement. Here's your odd fact for the night. Most enterprise clients can spot a leadership vacuum within 3 email exchanges. It's not about tone, it's about coherence, and Venturon had none left. Meanwhile, Trevant had 3 clients, across 3 continents, all waiting to see the same thing. Not the press release, not the logo, but the hand that was steady when everything else shook. Hello, everyone. Tonight, we begin with something that doesn't come crashing through your window, but slips beneath your door while you're sleeping. Picture this. The cabin lights dim, the engines hum like an ancient lullaby, and the Sao Paulo skyline sinks beneath a blanket of clouds. That's where we are. Business class, 2:30 a.m. Most people are draped in wine-dulled dreams. I'm not. My screen flickered once, then again, and the subject line appeared like it had been waiting for the exact moment my guard was down. Termination notice, effective immediately. Now here's the part they don't prepare you for. You might think you'd scream or panic or hurl your laptop across the cabin, but I just blinked. Blinked like maybe the screen hadn't loaded all the way, maybe the Wi-Fi cut out. But no, it was all there. My name, my role, my erasure. Your employment with Venturon Technologies has been terminated, effective immediately. Your access has been revoked. Please do not return to any company property. That's it. No call, no closure, just clinical language from the man who shook my hand 2 weeks ago and said, "You're the only one I trust to pull this off." Trust. So before you get too comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually like what I do here. And while we're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who else is still awake at this hour. Now shut off your lights, maybe turn on a fan for a little white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey. Everyone else around me was dreaming, dreams financed by company cards and stretched between 5-star meetings and red-eye flights. But I sat there, wide awake, in the belly of a metal bird somewhere over the Atlantic, realizing I had just been fired at 35,000 feet. Not just fired, erased. The move was so precise it felt surgical. They didn't even wait until I landed, didn't even risk the courtesy of confrontation. And the silence? The silence was louder than any betrayal. Let me say something that might sting a little if you've been in my shoes. Sometimes, silence doesn't mean confusion. It means calculation. Because someone had to sign off on that email. Someone scheduled the revocation. Someone hit send, knowing I was still midair, representing the company on the biggest global deal it had ever closed. No turbulence, no storm, just the polite violence of corporate cowardice. And now here comes the first strange fact of the night. Did you know the average corporate email lasts longer in someone's inbox than an employee lasts in their chair? Yeah, more people remember the urgent memo than the person who wrote it. Anyway, as I sat staring at that digital dagger in my chest, I noticed something else. My hands, still calm. My breath, still steady. That's how I knew, deep down, I'd been ready for this. Not in the way people say they're ready, but in the way people who've seen betrayal coming plan for it. So I reached under the seat. Not for a blanket, not for a bottle, but for a matte black laptop with no stickers, no serial number, and no connections to Venturon's network. This laptop wasn't standard issue. This was mine. Encrypted, isolated, untouchable. And when I opened it, the screen hummed softly, like it was exhaling with me. A slow blink, a flicker, and then Trevant, a name no one at Venturon had ever heard, a name that had never needed a business card. Now, before you assume this is some Bond-level tech thriller setup, let me correct you. Trevant wasn't revenge. It was insurance. See, I'd learned a while ago that in companies like Venturon, power doesn't protect loyalty. It punishes independence. The more capable you are, the more threatening you become. And threats? Well, they get silenced. So I had started backing things up. Not in secret, not illegally, but quietly. Every contract, every strategy draft, every whisper of the Trident deal, just in case. Funny, isn't it? The company called me their closer. I was the one who flew into collapsing markets, salvaged billion-dollar deals, and smiled through 16-hour days like they were spa treatments. But the moment I stopped being useful as cover, they closed me. Now here's the part no one expects. I smiled. Right there, in the glow of that cold screen, with an espresso drip of fury in my veins and a plan already clicking into motion. Because they hadn't fired someone lost, they had freed someone ready. Argument of the night. Firing someone mid-flight doesn't cut them off. It launches them. So yes, the plane was still hurtling across the sky. The air outside was thinner than ice. But my next move? Already breathing beneath my fingertips. I wasn't locked out. They were locked in, trapped in the same brittle politics, the same false promotions, the same PR games dressed up as strategy. Meanwhile, I was airborne, and I was just getting started. I remember glancing around the cabin, half expecting someone to look up, to notice the quiet implosion unfolding in 11B, but no one stirred. The guy across the aisle had his mouth open, dreaming of quarterly bonuses or beach vacations. A woman 2 rows up murmured something in her sleep and turned over, still tucked in her designer blanket. It hit me. I was the only person awake in the sky and completely untethered from everything I used to be. And the strangest thing? I wasn't scared. I was floating, metaphorically and literally, somewhere between hemispheres, between an identity I didn't choose to lose and a future I had already begun shaping in encrypted files and unsent drafts. Let me tell you something else odd. People think betrayal is loud. A slammed door, a public humiliation, a shouting match in a glass office. But it's not. The most effective betrayal wears soft shoes and slips out the back while the meeting's still going. And this was ballet. Venturon had danced me right out of existence without breaking a sweat. A sterile goodbye, no subject line emojis, not even a bullet point for impact. And yet, in their efficiency, they'd made a single fatal mistake. They assumed I had nowhere else to go. But Trevant had already been born. Small, quiet, deliberate. A whisper of infrastructure, a few trusted people, a framework that hadn't needed spotlight because it had strategy. It started as a backup, a sandbox, a what if. What if we built the version of Venturon we were always promised? What if agility and ethics weren't just brand words? What if we made something where the deal makers didn't have to apologize for being better than their managers? Wild, right? And here's your trivia of the night. The first digital startup registered under a pseudonym and launched from a hotel room in Jakarta, it was valued at $20 million within 8 months. Moral of the story, you don't need a boardroom to build a kingdom. Sometimes all you need is a chair, a screen, and the freedom to hit send without looking over your shoulder. Back to the flight. The cabin lights shifted again, just a flicker, like the plane itself sensed what was happening. I leaned back and pulled up a folder titled Phase 2. Inside, drafts of alternate terms for the Trident partners. Custom integration architecture for each jurisdiction, 3 sets of onboarding timelines tailored to language, culture, and regulatory quirks. And one little note to myself: if they cut the rope, build the bridge. Venturin had given me every reason to leave, but instead of begging for scraps, I had gathered seeds. Now, I wasn't planning revenge, let's clear that up. Revenge is reactive. What I wanted, what I was already doing, was reclaiming. Because Venturin didn't just fire me, they stole the narrative. They framed it as a transition, a change in direction, a reassignment of responsibility. But I wasn't a paragraph in their press release. I was the architect of their only future-facing asset. You know what I mean? When you've poured blood into a project and someone else casually decides you're no longer aligned with strategic vision, as if they had the vision. Here's a hot take. You can't lose your seat at the table when you were the one who built the damn table. So, when they locked me out of Slack and killed my badge access, they didn't close the book. They just ended the prologue. The story? That was mine now. And it wasn't going to be a tragedy. Not unless you were them. One last detail before I finally tried to sleep, the auto-generated signature at the bottom of the email. It said simply, "Sincerely, Grayson Hart, Chief Executive Officer, Venturin Technologies." And I laughed, softly, a real laugh, the kind that only comes when you've been underestimated just long enough to become dangerous. Because that man, the one who once told me, "You make the impossible look ordinary," just fired me from 35,000 feet and forgot I was still holding the parachute. The thing about parachutes is, no one appreciates them until they're falling. I stayed awake the rest of that flight, not out of panic, but out of strategy. I wasn't scrambling. I was sorting through what I still had, what they thought they took, and what I'd never let them touch. I opened a folder labeled Foundations, the original draft of the Trident architecture. It was clean, modular, multi-jurisdictional, and, this part always made me smile, it was something their senior tech team had once told me was too ambitious to deploy at scale. Then, of course, they rolled it out 6 months later with someone else's name in the slide footer. So I kept a copy. Not out of spite, out of pattern recognition. You see, I'd started to notice how often my contributions went unnamed. How many times my frameworks were used, praised, applauded, just never attributed. That's how it starts. Not with demotions, not with conflict, but with disappearances. Tiny erasures, one bullet point at a time. Like the meeting where I wasn't introduced, even though I had written the entire playbook we were about to pitch. Or the partner dinner where my seat was suddenly shifted closer to the window. Or the time a reporter quoted my market analysis word for word under Mallory Hart's name. Let's talk about Mallory for a second. Ah yes, our golden child. Legacy hire, daughter of Grayson. 2 years of corporate experience and a tendency to call interns sweetheart. And yet, somehow, she'd been appointed to advise on international strategy. At first, I thought she was harmless, the kind of harmless that wears expensive beige and gets lost in her own spreadsheets. But then came the incident, an unauthorized data transfer during a client demo. Confidential user information live on a projector in front of a room of Japanese executives. It should have ended her career. Instead, it became my problem. Clean it up quietly, Grayson said. She didn't mean to. She just didn't know. And like a loyal soldier, I did. Pulled favors, smoothed press leaks, took the fall. And do you know what they called it? Beta testing inconsistency. Mallory went on a wellness retreat in Bali. I went on an overnight flight to Singapore to personally apologize to the client, alone. They didn't even send flowers. Here's your odd trivia of the night. The average CEO's daughter is promoted 1.7 times faster than a male peer with twice the tenure. And no, that's not from satire. That's just data, baby. Anyway, I survived it. But something shifted. Loyalty, when it's not mutual, begins to rot. So when I logged into the shared drive to prep for Sao Paulo and found my pitch deck listed with her name as author, I didn't scream, I didn't confront, I just saved a copy. Then I closed the file, and I made a decision. No more co-signing erasure. That's when Trevant stopped being a hypothetical. That's when it became inevitable. Let me describe the logo to you. It's not flashy, no sleek animations, just a single sharp glyph, an upward motion, like a bridge mid-build. Because that's what Trevant was always meant to be. Not an escape, a redirection, a reclamation. Back on the plane, I switched tabs and reread an old message from Jenna Park, my favorite former legal counsel at Venturon, and now one of Trevant's silent partners. Her words? If they ever try to erase you, remember, I know who built the goddamn map. That was 2 months ago. 2 months before Grayson locked me out, and 2 months after I realized I'd never be invited to the table. I'd always be asked to prepare it. That night, high above the Atlantic, I drafted my first message to her. They pulled the trigger. We pull the lever. I didn't send it yet, not until I touched down, but I had it ready. See, some people wait for doors to open. Others build hinges from scratch. And I wasn't just ready to walk through. I was ready to own the room on the other side. Touchdown in New York was unceremonious. No grand finale, no waiting car with tinted windows. Just a customs officer who barely glanced at my passport and an air that smelled faintly of jet fuel and yesterday's ambition. I stepped outside, hailed a yellow cab the old-fashioned way, and slid into the back seat like a ghost. Not the scary kind, the forgotten kind. As the city skyline unfolded, I realized something peculiar. The buildings didn't look smaller, exactly, but they looked less permanent, like props in a theater I no longer performed in. We pulled up to the Venturon building at 8:40 a.m., 20 minutes before the start of the Monday morning strategy meeting. I knew the timing, knew the tempo, had choreographed it 100 times from inside. Only this time, I wasn't on the call sheet. I stepped into the lobby, badge in hand, ready for the formality. The same floor-to-ceiling marble that had watched me sprint toward a dozen promotions that never landed now greeted me like I was a stranger. The security guard, Daniel, blinked like I'd walked out of a dream. "Miss Blake," he said, hesitant, I wasn't told you'd be coming in today." "I wasn't told I wouldn't be," I replied, pressing my badge to the gate. Red light. Access denied. Daniel winced. "I'm really sorry. HR flagged the system early this morning." "I understand." I meant it. He wasn't the villain. He was just the last person left who still remembered my name without needing to check the company directory. Upstairs, no one met my eyes. Not the analysts I used to mentor, not the managers I'd coached through their first investor calls, not even the intern whose entire pitch script I had rewritten hours just to save her from embarrassment. The silence wasn't hostile. It was orchestrated. Strategic silence. You'd think the worst part was losing the job, but it wasn't. It was standing next to your old desk, now pristine, empty, the air still warm from someone else's breath, and realizing no one was going to ask why you were gone. A memory hit me so hard I nearly stumbled. 1 year earlier, that exact same spot buzzed with energy. I had just returned from securing a massive South Korean infrastructure deal. There was applause, champagne, someone brought cupcakes with little country flags stuck in them. Grayson shook my hand and said, "You know, Marin, people like you make everyone else believe this place is smarter than it is." At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Now I know it was a warning. Because when a system survives on image, truth becomes a liability. Let's talk about the promotion that never happened. 6 weeks before my termination, I was quietly nominated for EVP of Global Strategy. Quietly, as in no one told me directly, but the hallway buzzed like bees around broken glass. The title made me laugh, not because I didn't want it, but because I had already been doing the job for over a year. If you think that sounds bitter, here's a fact to chew on. Women in enterprise roles are 21% more likely to be assigned responsibilities without a matching title or pay. That's not bitterness, that's math. After closing the expanded contract with the European consortium, the one no one thought could be salvaged, I had expected something. Not fireworks, just fairness. Instead, I was told the promotion was under review, then awaiting budget realignment, then nothing, silence. And then, 2 weeks later, I heard it. Through a slightly open door during a board lunch, I was prepping a portfolio next door when a voice, casual and smirking, slipped into the room like a knife. Marin's brilliant, but let's be honest, she walks into a room and no other guy wants to speak. Someone else chuckled. "Yeah, she's not exactly EVP material. She's more field ups." Field ups? Like I was some glossy sales rep they could fly around to close deals and then tuck into a drawer when real decisions were being made. They didn't want to promote me. They wanted to contain me. Too visible, too poised, too effective to redirect credit away from. That's the threat I posed. I was unclaimable. And that meant I had to go. Here's tonight's irony. The more competent you are in a broken system, the faster it finds ways to silence you. Not with demotions, but with erasure, with faint praise and disappearing paths, with someone else's name quietly replacing yours on a slide deck. And yet, I didn't rage, didn't quit in protest, didn't torch the bridge. I did what they taught me to do. I smiled, I boarded 3 international flights, and I closed the biggest deal of the company's history. Because I knew, deeply, absolutely, that if they wouldn't give me the seat, I'd build the damn table. And the tools, they were already in my hands. The boardroom wasn't even locked. I remember thinking that as I passed it, door slightly ajar, chairs still warm from the meeting that decided I wasn't worth keeping. Inside, the wall-sized screen still displayed a paused video feed from Sao Paulo, like some kind of ghost image from a life I was no longer allowed to live. And there she was, Mallory Hart, hair immaculate, speech rehearsed, wearing that navy sheath dress she probably called timeless while someone else picked it out. Standing in front of a group of executives, some of whom I had personally walked through crisis training last year, delivering a summary of the Trident deal I had built from the ground up. Her words were mine. Her numbers were mine. The framework was mine. The face? Not mine. No footnote, no mention, no attribution. Just a steady stream of buzzwords flowing from someone who thought jurisdictional compliance meant having a passport. I didn't barge in, didn't shout. Instead, I leaned back against the cool glass wall in the hallway and listened. She was doing a decent job, I'll admit. Memorized, smoothed, even paused at the right moments for effect. But there was one thing she couldn't imitate: conviction. You can rehearse intelligence, but you cannot fake having built something with your bare hands. Here's the side fact for tonight. In a study of over 400 boardrooms, 64% of executives admitted they've seen someone get promoted based on presentation alone, despite doubts about competence. And I had just watched that statistic take human form. The real kicker? Grayson stood at the back of the room, nodding, arms crossed, looking proud, like some director watching his star pupil finally nailed a scene, like this had been the plan all along. And maybe it had. I don't think betrayal always starts with intent. Sometimes it begins with convenience. You do a favor, you cover for someone, you fix a mistake too well, and suddenly they forget it ever happened. They don't thank you. They absorb you. Like a sponge soaks up a spill and then pretends it was always clean. Let's rewind 3 weeks. Back when the Trident proposal was in final revision, I had uploaded the master pitch deck to the shared drive, a folder clearly marked Final, Do Not Edit. 2 days later, I returned to it and noticed the author metadata had changed. Mallory Hart. I thought it was a glitch. Then I opened it. She had made just enough changes to call it hers. A few bullet points rewritten, a new font here, some layout tweaks there, cosmetic edits. But the architecture? Still mine. Every model, every risk analysis, every regional clause based on 12 months of cultural intelligence I had gathered in transit lounges and after-hour sake meetings. I didn't confront her, because what would they say? That's just collaboration. Or worse, are you being emotional? That word, emotional, used like a trapdoor under any woman who questions her own erasure. So instead of defending my work, I packed my bags, booked a flight to Tokyo, and I made a promise to myself. If they wouldn't protect my name, I'd build a place where names couldn't be stolen. That night in my apartment, I sat by the window watching the skyline flicker like a dying constellation. I stared at her version of my deck until the letters blurred. Then I closed it, not out of defeat, out of resolve. Because from that moment on, I wasn't negotiating for Venturin anymore. I was collecting intelligence for Trevant. Here's a controversial truth. Some of us don't leave because we're weak. We leave because we're tired of pretending the system will change if we just work harder. So I stopped working harder for them and started building outside the walls. Every conversation, every call, every late-night spreadsheet I shared with legal or engineering, I made a second version. Mine, secured, offline, untraceable. And slowly, the foundation formed. Raheem Silva from infrastructure, Jenna Park from compliance, Noah Tan from strategic finance. Each one of them had seen the rot from the inside. Each one of them had been sidelined for being too good at what they were hired to do. And together, we began something quieter. Not a rebellion, not yet, just a plan. A structure ready to catch us when, not if, the system failed again. Back in the hallway, outside that boardroom, I slipped my phone from my pocket and opened our private channel, the one they didn't know existed. 3 words. It's happening now. No panic, no fireworks, just confirmation. Because if they were finally willing to erase me openly, then I was finally willing to reveal what I'd built in silence. That night was the gala. Gold linens, crystal chandeliers, music so soft it felt engineered for plausible deniability. No one could say they didn't hear it, but no one remembered a single note. It was supposed to be a celebration of Venturon's strategic growth vision. Translation, a coronation for Mallory Hart. Her promotion had gone live on the internal newsletter that morning. Vice President of International Strategy, a title I'd pitched, shaped, and staffed. Back when it was just me, working from 3 time zones and a single suitcase, trying to convince European telecoms that Venturon wasn't just another US-based over-promising vaporware vendor. Back then, they said international strategy was too ambitious. Now, with the deal closed and the champagne chilled, it was a headline, and it wasn't mine. I walked into the ballroom an hour late, just as they dimmed the lights for the big announcement. People clapped with the enthusiasm of salaried loyalty. Some even turned to look at me with those half smiles, the ones that say, "I know this is wrong, but I'd like to keep my job." I found a corner, not in the shadows, just outside the glow. I held a champagne flute I didn't sip and watched them parade her across the stage like a solution. Grayson gave a speech that oozed faux humility. We've watched Mallory grow into this role, and I can think of no one better to lead our most important global initiative, the Trident Partnership. There it was, the erasure, now weaponized. He turned to her. She'll be shadowing Marin on the Sao Paulo trip as part of the transition. Shadowing me, as if I had agreed, as if I had been consulted, as if I was some passing torchbearer for the woman who'd just been handed my name, my title, and my territory. I didn't flinch, not visibly, but inside was a quiet detonation, because this wasn't an insult, it was a command. Help her take what's yours, and smile while doing it. I raised the glass in mock salute as they clapped again. Then Mallory found me. Of course she did. She walked across the ballroom with that oblivious cheerfulness only the protected know. Designer heels, perfect hair, rehearsed smile. "Hey, I hope we'll have time to walk through the Sao Paulo structure before the flight," she said brightly. "I'm still trying to catch up on the European framework." "You should," I said smoothly. "They tend to ask tougher questions than your average gala crowd." She giggled like I'd complimented her shoes. "Well, I'll just point them to you," she said. "You always know what to say." I smiled, the kind of smile that sharpens, not softens, because I already knew something she didn't. She wouldn't be on the flight. I had quietly adjusted my itinerary 2 days prior, rerouted through Buenos Aires, changed departure times, booked through a private agency outside Venturon's booking system. No one had noticed, because no one was looking at me anymore. They were too busy watching her. Funny how fast an organization will forget the hands that built it once a newer, shinier face appears. Here's a strange fact for you. When women are replaced in leadership positions, 63% of the time, it's with someone considered more approachable, a word that's never, ever defined. Approachability, invisibility, interchangeability. It's a slippery ladder until you stop climbing it altogether. After the gala, I walked home through the city in heels that hurt, carrying a name that no longer felt like mine. My phone buzzed once, a secure ping from Jenna. Just the words, "Full lockout confirmed. All systems disconnected by HQ this afternoon. They're not waiting." They weren't waiting. Good, neither was I. By the time I reached my apartment, I had already begun setting things in motion. The Sao Paulo meetings weren't just crucial, they were the last piece. Telnova, Eurocom, Brazil Inc. 3 telecom giants, 3 cultural minefields, 1 synchronized migration worth $1.5 billion over 7 years. A deal I had hand-stitched across coffee tables and midnight calls, and they had just handed it to a woman who didn't know which continent each clause referred to. Venturan thought they had it locked, but they had no idea I had already opened the exit. Back inside, I opened the matte black laptop. No notifications, no noise, just the Trevant dashboard pulsing softly in the dark. The login page was clean, secure, invisible, built by the ones they called too ambitious. 3 tabs waited. 1, transition schedule for each Trident partner. 2, customized risk disclosures in local languages. 3, encrypted message drafts ready to send. I hovered over the first email, then clicked open the note Jenna had sent earlier that day. They think you're the risk. That's how you know they're afraid of you. Time to act. I breathed out slowly, because she was right. And in 48 hours, Sao Paulo would prove just how much they'd miscalculated. The airport was quieter than usual. I had rerouted myself through Buenos Aires, shaving a day off the visible itinerary and ghosting the corporate calendar altogether. No auto updates, no Slack messages, no digital breadcrumbs for Venturan to follow. I didn't just want to arrive early in São Paulo. I wanted to arrive invisible, because this time I wasn't coming to represent them. I was coming to finish something only I could finish, and start something they could never touch. The Trident deal had been my crucible. 10 months of travel, 10 months of translation, of not just language, but culture, suspicion, and bureaucracy. 3 corporate empires, each with its own pride, each convinced the others would back out first. And me, the tether. Not the face in the brochure, the spine in the structure. I checked into the hotel under an alias, something harmless and vaguely Italian. Rahim had helped me set up the booking weeks ago, back when we were still just whispering about escape routes and what-if scenarios over encrypted calls. From my room, I could see the skyline of São Paulo stretch like molten glass in the afternoon haze. There's something ancient about cities this size. They hum differently, like they've seen too many deals fall apart to be impressed by another handshake. I ordered room service. I didn't touch it. Too many thoughts to chew through first. And here's your fact for the night. One of my favorites, actually. Corporate sabotage is rarely an explosion. It's a series of very polite, very strategic decisions made behind closed doors. Mine was no different. Grayson's board had voted for the erasure weeks ago. I didn't have proof, but I didn't need it. You can feel the cold long before you see the frost. What they didn't expect was for the clients to notice the temperature too. The morning after I arrived, I met with Luiz Mata, CEO of Brazil Inc. His handshake was firm, his expression unreadable. We sat in a quiet corner of his office, coffee between us, and reviewed the final architecture. After an hour, he leaned back, watching me. "You know I trust you, Marin," he said, "but I don't trust them." "I wouldn't either," I said, plain as paper. He nodded once, slowly. "Then why are you still there?" It was more than a question. It was an invitation. So I gave him a new answer. "What if there were another way?" I said, lowering my voice just enough that it felt like an agreement before the terms were even spoken. Same architecture, same team, but no politics, no games. He didn't flinch. "Travant?" I blanked. "You knew?" He smiled. "You forget, I didn't pick Venturan. I picked you." That sentence unhooked something in my chest. Not just relief, recognition. Because that's what the last 10 months had really been, hadn't it? A slow, quiet unveiling. Not of a product, of a person. Me. Grayson didn't understand that trust is currency, and I had banked more of it than he'd ever notice, until it was no longer his to spend. I left Luis's office with his signature on a memo of understanding. Not binding, not official, just 3 short paragraphs confirming his interest in exploring alternative partnership models pending executional clarity. Translation? You give me the plan, and I'll give you the future. That afternoon, I opened Travant's system on the matte black laptop and uploaded the integration specs. Clean, modular, locally hosted, and invisible to Venturan's network. The dashboard flickered. File received. Transition mode, passive. Passive. Just how I liked it. Because the best moves in chess aren't announcements, they're positioning. And by the end of that day, I had positioned myself in the one place no one could follow, right between the client and the decision. Meanwhile, back at Venturon, I imagined Mallory Hart standing in the Tokyo boardroom being asked questions she couldn't answer about timelines she didn't write. I imagined her smiling too hard, pretending she had to check on that with Marin, not realizing I had already been locked out of the system. Poor thing. She was shadowing a ghost. You want an argument? Here's one. Loyalty to the wrong people isn't virtue. It's delay. And I was done delaying, done being loyal to a company that couldn't spell my name right in press releases, but had no problem pasting it onto a "thank you for your service" email. Travant wasn't born out of anger. It was born out of clarity. Clarity that no one was coming to save us, that the ladder was rigged, that if we wanted elevation, we'd have to build our own scaffolding, and do it quietly. Because that's the thing about stillness. It feels passive, but in the right hands, it's preparation. And I had just finished preparing. The first time I walked into Telnova's Tokyo headquarters, it was snowing. Not a metaphorical snow, real snow, the quiet kind, the kind that covers chaos in white and dares you to call it peace. That memory came back to me as I landed in Tokyo again, this time with nothing but a carry-on, a matte black laptop, and a company I could no longer speak for, officially anyway. But unofficially, that was another story entirely. I didn't go to the hotel first. I went straight to the meeting. Yuki Asano, Telnova's CTO, had a mind like a scalpel and a handshake like a riddle. He didn't believe in small talk or in marketing slides. He believed in architecture, in redundancies, in the absence of failure, not the illusion of success. "You're early," he said, no smile. "I always am," I replied. We sat across from each other in a glass-walled conference room that overlooked Shinjuku. The city below moved like circuits, predictable but never slow. "Why are you here?" he asked after 2 minutes of silence. I could have said the standard line, could have explained the strategic pivot or the unexpected leadership transition back at Venturon, but I didn't. Instead, I asked him something that changed everything. What if I offered you the same system, but without the politics? He didn't blink. "You're not with them anymore?" I shook my head. Not officially, not functionally, not morally. Another pause. Then he said the quiet thing out loud. "I always suspected it was you who built the compliance layer, the one with the real-time jurisdictional switches." By the time I returned to Sao Paulo, I was operating on espresso and instinct. 3 cities, 3 cultures, 3 silent nods. That's all it had taken. Not press tours, not investor decks, just one undeniable pattern. Every single client trusted me, but not the company I had just stopped representing. Back in Brazil, the air was thick, like the city had been holding its breath, waiting to see which way the future would tip. The Venturan team thought I was still in transit, thought I'd be landing the next day with Mallory in tow, ready to walk her through key talking points like she hadn't hijacked an entire department using my work and her last name. What they didn't know? I was already here, already working, and she wouldn't be joining me because I had adjusted the itinerary behind the scenes. New flights, new hotel, new schedule. And since Grayson's team had removed my access, they had no idea they'd just handed me the cleanest exit imaginable. Funny how trying to erase someone's presence sometimes makes them impossible to track. My meeting with Louise Mata lasted 4 hours. Long table, cold water, no pleasantries. He grilled me. Hard. Who owns this model now? I do, I said. You're no longer with Venturin? Correct. Then why are we even talking? I looked him in the eye. Because everything you wanted from them, I already built. Without the chaos, without the bottlenecks, without the risk. He sat back. And if it falls apart later? It won't. You sure? I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough. Unless I leave. That landed. A silence stretched between us. Then he exhaled through his nose, the way Brazilian CEOs do when they've decided something they won't say out loud just yet. I trust you, Marin. The words settled like anchors. But I don't trust Venturin. I nodded. I don't blame you. And then, casually, like asking if I wanted more coffee, he said, if there were a way to finish this deal without them, I would take it. I didn't smile. Not yet. Instead, I asked, and if I showed you that way, quietly, cleanly, would you move forward? He looked at me carefully. No blinking, no translation needed. You know the answer. It wasn't consent. It was confirmation. Because what I had just done was unofficially decouple the final node of the Trident deal from Venturin's influence. 3 cities, 3 conversations, 3 invisible threads. Tell Nova, send me the specs directly. Eurocom, we'll deal with the version that works. BrazilLink, we're only doing this if it's with you. This wasn't sabotage. This was gravity. Clients didn't want the brand. They wanted the person who had been holding it together the whole time. So when I returned to my hotel and opened the Tromvant dashboard, I wasn't hoping anymore. I was watching. Because by that point, all 3 clients had signed in. No fanfare, no launch banner, just quiet, secure credentials exchanged through encrypted channels, Rahim's masterpiece. They weren't just curious, they were migrating. Here's tonight's ironic trivia. The average enterprise defection begins 9.4 days before the official paperwork is signed, not when the email is sent, not when the lawsuit drops, but when the first silent handshake happens behind closed doors. Mine had happened in Tokyo, over black tea, in London, across a red-lined PDF, in Sao Paulo, with a question that wasn't hypothetical. I wasn't just collecting approvals, I was building momentum. That night, I opened my inbox and drafted 3 simple emails, one to each of the client leads I had met over the past year. Subject line, the door is open. Message body, 4 words, you know where I am. That was it. No call to action, no bullet points, because they didn't need convincing. They just needed a way out. And I had become the exit. Here's an argument no one likes to hear. If your company loses its people, it will lose its clients next. Venturon had forgotten that. They built strategy around ownership, not relationship. And by the time they realized the difference, the migration had already started. Not with logos, with trust. And I was carrying it across borders, one quiet nod at a time. The morning after I sent the emails, I woke up before sunrise, not from nerves, but from habit. Years of 4 a.m. flights and 5 a.m. meetings had taught my body to obey a rhythm long after the reason for it was gone. I made a coffee I didn't drink and watched the Sao Paulo skyline turn from charcoal to gold. Nothing had officially happened yet. No contract signed, no press releases, no fireworks. But in the silence, something had shifted. The balance of power had tilted, and for once, I was on the side holding the weight. I logged into Tromvant's internal dashboard. Rahim had upgraded the portal overnight, 3 new modules, live, fully encrypted. We now had multi-user integration logs, real-time client sessions, and a passive notification system that pinged without ever touching public cloud. Linda was already inside. Tell Nova, too. BrazilLink had uploaded 2 technical questions directly into the system. Short, specific, urgent. Translation: they were getting ready. I refreshed again. 3 green dots blinked back at me. 3 clients, 3 continents, already here. Meanwhile, in New York, I knew exactly what was unfolding. Venturon's Monday morning strategy call was supposed to begin at 9 a.m. EST. Grayson would have walked into the glass-walled conference room in his tailored navy suit, holding a printed status report compiled by someone 2 pay grades too low to challenge him. He would have expected updates on Trident onboarding. Except there were none. No email check-ins, no status memos, no early indicators of client alignment, just silence. The first call he placed would be to Mallory, who was still sitting in a Tokyo hotel room, confused and increasingly panicked about why no one had shown up for her 10 a.m. walkthrough with Telnova. The second call would be to the interim team in London, only to find out Linda Clark was unavailable for further comment and had redirected all communication to newly designated contacts. He'd try Brazil last, maybe thinking Louise was the softest target. But Louise's assistant, bless her calm, composed heart, would answer the phone and say, "Mr. Mata is currently unavailable for Venturan-related business." That phrase, so deliberate, so deadly. Here's your strange detail for the night. The most common way clients cut ties with enterprise vendors? Silence. Not lawsuits, not blowouts, just vanished access. By 11:30 a.m. EST, Grayson would know something was wrong. By noon, he'd suspect it was me. But by then, it wouldn't matter, because I hadn't taken anything from him. I had simply reminded everyone who gave them their business in the first place. And that's not theft. That's realignment. There's a difference. One requires deception. The other requires proof. And proof? I had that in spades. Call transcripts, email trails, draft versions with tracked changes, internal approvals with my name in the metadata they'd forgotten to scrub. I had never shared them, because I didn't need to. I wasn't here to burn the bridge. I was here to make sure no one else drowned. By 1 p.m., Jenna sent me a 1-line message. IR team just reached out to all 3 clients. Spin control initiated. I replied with a smile emoji. They were flailing, and nothing looks worse to stakeholders than visible flailing, especially when your press office is emailing Eurocom for confirmation of continued strategic alignment, and Eurocom replies with, "Please direct all inquiries to your current point of contact." No name, no title, just a polite middle finger in corporate dialect. I left the hotel around sunset and walked 3 blocks to a cafe I used to sit in during the early days of the deal. The waiter recognized me, brought me tea I didn't order. I nodded in thanks, and he nodded back. It felt like being remembered, not as a client, but as a person. And in that moment, I realized Venturan had forgotten what I looked like. Not literally, but functionally. I had become the fixer, the negotiator, the field ops. They didn't see me anymore. They saw the space I filled, which meant they thought anyone could fill it. They forgot that presence is not replaceable, that trust is not transferable. And now they were learning that in real time, with every unanswered call and every dashboard they could no longer access. Here's your argument for the night. Corporate loyalty is a transaction. If one side stops paying, the contract is void. And Venturan had stopped paying, not in money, in dignity, in recognition, in space at the table. So I stopped showing up and started building a new table altogether. And by the time they realized what that meant, it had already been set. If anyone had walked into the Global Tech Summit in Munich that morning, they would have thought it was just another industry panel. Name badges, espresso carts, branded lanyards that dug slightly into your neck after hour 2. Room C214 was booked under Venturan Technologies, Strategic Expansion Showcase. Translation: a desperate attempt to repair their public image after 3 days of total radio silence from their largest enterprise clients. I didn't appear on the speaker list. I wasn't on the agenda, but I showed up anyway. I wore slate gray, no branding, no logo, just clean lines and a mind sharpened by months of erasure. Grayson was already inside when I arrived, pacing. He was flanked by two of the newer compliance managers, their suits just slightly too stiff, their eyes moving too quickly to be calm. Across from him stood a man I knew well, Marek Dvorsky, CEO of MirCloud Solutions, the Eastern European firm Venturin was now trying to pivot toward as a consolation prize. I had met Marek once over dinner in Prague. He liked red wine, hated vague timelines, and had asked me then, half joking, "Why aren't you running the company?" That day in Munich, I walked right into room C214 as they were finishing their opening slide. Marek looked up. His eyes widened, and then smiled. He remembered. "Marin Blake," he said. "Interesting. I didn't see your name on the docket." I stepped forward. "I represent Trevant," I said. "Calm, level, sharp as steel. We've submitted a parallel proposal." Grayson turned toward me, and the blood drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug in the floor. "This is a closed session," he hissed. "No," I said, evenly. "This is a joint session. Your team submitted 2 conflicting strategy decks to Mayor. The summit organizers requested full alignment, so here I am." Marek looked between us. His CTO handed him 2 sets of specs. He didn't even open Venturin's. He opened mine. "This is leaner," he said, scanning the first page. "You've already addressed our data sovereignty concerns." "We anticipated them," I said. Grayson snapped, "You really want to work with someone who abandons her company mid-deal." I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I don't abandon ships. I rebuild them without the people who drilled the holes." You could hear a pin drop in that room. Even the AV tech in the corner stopped pretending to fix his cables. Marek looked up. "We'll proceed with a dual review," he said, "and I want Marin's proposal considered as the primary option." Grayson opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. He had taken nothing from him. He had simply failed to keep what I built. After the meeting, I stepped into the hallway. Jenna was waiting near the registration table, holding a folded copy of the summit agenda and a hotel coffee that was probably more bitterness than caffeine. "You walked in there like a storm," she said. "No," I replied, "like gravity." She grinned. "They're scrambling. Again. Grayson called an emergency board session for this afternoon. Mallory's gone completely offline. No one knows where she is." "She won't come back," I said. "She can't," Jenna agreed. Because the thing about stolen names, stolen titles, stolen credit, they don't last. Not when the work starts to demand answers, and Mallory had none. Meanwhile, back at the cafe in São Paulo, Rahim had just activated the final system migration for Eurocom. Fully transitioned, 0 downtime. Perfect. 3 dots, 3 clients, 1 platform, and not a single mention of Venturin anywhere. That afternoon, we received the first inbound message from MER. They weren't just interested, they were ready. "Can you implement in 60 days? I responded with a single word, yes. Because now, finally, I wasn't playing catch-up. I wasn't translating someone else's dream. I was writing the architecture myself, and the ink was dry. Here's your fun fact for tonight. The most effective disruption in tech history didn't come from innovation. It came from inversion, giving the right people control and taking it away from the wrong ones. That was Trevant, not a company, a correction. And the ones who couldn't see it were already out of the frame. I returned to New York under overcast skies and a name they had tried to bury. The city moved like it always did, impatient, dazzling, indifferent. But as the cab turned onto 7th Avenue, something felt different. It wasn't the skyline, it was me. I wasn't a visitor anymore. I was a counterpoint, a reminder that erasure is not final, just quiet. The driver dropped me off in front of Venturin's headquarters. The building still shimmered like a promise, all brushed steel and tinted glass, but I didn't see ambition anymore. I saw memory and a mistake. Inside, the lobby hadn't changed. Same receptionist who didn't look up, same digital directory that once bore my name. Now, just VP Mallory Hart, glowing softly like a placeholder in a game no one won. I didn't stop at the front desk, didn't flash a badge I no longer had. I simply walked to the elevator like I still belonged there. Because in a way, I did. I had left behind blueprints in every corner of that place, some literal, some emotional. The product didn't move without my systems. The clients didn't breathe without my frameworks. Upstairs, the 27th floor was a desert. Half the desks were empty. The other half might as well have been. People stared into screens like they were waiting for a new script. No one met my eye, except one person. Jules, one of the few junior analysts who still had a spine. She stood slowly from her desk as I passed and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "I hope you burn the whole thing down." I didn't smile, but I did nod, because I wasn't here to start fires. I was here to turn off the oxygen. I reached my old office, door wide open, desk cleared. No plaque, no picture. The chair was new. They'd replaced even that. Like I'd left a virus behind, and they were still disinfecting. On a nearby table, someone had left a printout of the internal company newsletter. The headline made me laugh out loud. Venturon welcomes new era of strategic integration. Subheadline, following Marin Blake's departure, VP Mallory Hart will assume full oversight of the Trident partnership. Departure. What a polite little lie. As if I had walked away on my own. I dropped the newsletter into the recycling bin and left the floor without saying another word. Back on the street, my phone buzzed. It was Raheem. 3 clients fully transitioned. MER onboarding begins next week. You're about to be very visible. I sent back a thumbs up emoji. Because I didn't need a headline. I had the foundation. Here's your odd detail for the night. The average person spends more time writing an exit email than the company spends remembering they ever worked there. I never sent mine. Why would I? They'd written my name out of the script long before the final scene. And yet, here we were, writing a new act with a new cast. Later that afternoon, Jenna texted me a screenshot. Grayson Hart had been removed from the Venturon board by unanimous vote. No lawsuits, no breakdowns, just a quiet line in the trade press. Sources confirm executive restructuring is underway following a series of confidential client transitions. It didn't mention me. It didn't have to. The silence said enough. Because this was never about making noise. This was about becoming the frequency no one could ignore. I walked 6 blocks to a small co-working space tucked between 2 old brownstones. We'd leased it for Trevant's New York outpost. Nothing fancy, just a few rooms, high ceilings, and a view of the Hudson that reminded us every day how fast things move when you stop trying to steer other people's ships. When I stepped inside, the team was already there. Raheem was whiteboarding migration frameworks. Jenna was on a call with MER's data team. Noah was updating the next phase of budget optimization in the corner, half a sandwich in his hand, total chaos in his spreadsheet. It was calm, but not passive. It was kinetic. Linda from Eurocom had sent over her revised agreement. Yuki had approved the second round of compliance sign-offs without a single red line. Louise was already planning the press coordination for rollout under Trevant's name. I didn't speak for a moment. I just watched. Watched what they thought they'd destroyed, still breathing, still building, still mine. Here's tonight's argument. You don't have to fight for a seat at the table if you build one big enough that others come to you. And Trevant? We weren't just setting a table. We were writing the guest list. The press release went live at 9:30 a.m. sharp. No countdown, no teaser post, just one clean, measured announcement uploaded through Travant's internal media portal and distributed to a list curated with surgical intent. Travant Inc. announces multi-continent strategic partnership with Telnova, Eurocom, and BrazilLink. The $1.5 billion 7-year agreement will deliver secure modular cloud integration across 3 global regions, redefining how enterprise infrastructure is deployed in diverse regulatory environments. There was no mention of Ventron, not out of spite, out of accuracy, because by now they were simply no longer part of the story. The subject line was subtle, the impact tectonic. By 10 a.m., my inbox had gone from desert to downpour. Tech journalists, industry analysts, 3 VC firms I'd never spoken to, someone from MIT who just wanted to know how we built the compliance layer in less than a year. By 10:27 a.m., the first trade article hit. The silent takeover. Who is Travant and why are industry giants following? A few minutes later, another one followed. From erased to essential, Marin Blake's quiet power play reshapes enterprise cloud. I didn't retweet anything, didn't like a single post. Instead, I sat in the sunlit common room of the Travant office, watching Raheem work through final testing on the MER framework. No one cheered, no one popped champagne, because this wasn't a finish line, it was a checkpoint, and the difference between the two is everything. Here's your strange trivia for the day. The average tech CEO is quoted in press more often in the first 48 hours after a scandal than in the 12 months of normal operations. So you can imagine what was happening over at Ventron HQ. I didn't have to imagine for long. Jenna forwarded me a chain of internal communications that had been, well, leaked was a generous word. Slipped is more accurate. The highlights? 1. Investor relations had no insight into why the Trident partners were no longer responding. 2. The interim strategy team had filed 2 separate incident reports on the platform migration halt. 3. Grayson was officially unreachable. And Mallory? Gone. Literally. Resigned the night before. No formal statement, no farewell email, just a blank calendar and a single internal memo. VP Hart will be transitioning out of her role effective immediately. No fanfare, no fallout, just absence. Like she had only ever been a placeholder for something she was never built to hold. Grayson, too, had been cut loose. The man who once called me the safest pair of hands in 3 continents was now ghosting his own board. Ventron issued a 2-line statement mid-afternoon. We continue to value our strategic relationships globally and are committed to excellence in delivery. It read like a hostage note. Meanwhile, Travant's client portal logged 3 new onboarding requests. Not from legacy firms, from startups, from fast-moving, regulation-savvy companies who had watched the whole thing unfold and saw not drama, but design. That was the difference. Ventron had chaos. We had clarity. And clarity travels faster than noise. Jenna appeared in the doorway of my office later that day, holding her phone and a look I hadn't seen since we first decided to build this thing. You're not going to believe who just called. I raised an eyebrow. She flipped the screen toward me. A voicemail transcription from a number we both recognized. This is Grayson. I just wanted to ask if this was personal. What happened? What you're doing? I didn't respond. Not to him, not even to Jenna, because I didn't need to. He already knew the answer. Yes, it was personal. It was also strategic and professional and earned and overdue. That night, I stepped onto the rooftop terrace as the sun slipped behind the skyline. The light turned the city into gold-tinted silhouettes, quiet monuments to decisions made and unmade. I thought about everything they'd taken, my name, my title, my access, and realized they'd taken none of it, because everything that mattered was still right here, built from silence, held together by trust, signed in the kind of ink you don't need a pen for. The following week moved with the quiet force of a well-set current. No dramatic pivots, no press conferences, just meetings, metrics, momentum. We finalized Eurocom's migration documentation. Linda's team uploaded full compliance logs without a single edit request, a first in their 10-year history. Telnova began live testing their regional API nodes, and Yuki emailed a one-line response. Flawless deployment, respect to your team. Brazililink initiated payroll routing for the first year's implementation funding. Clean, early, full amount. The dashboards didn't blink red once. This is what happens when the right people are trusted to do the work without being asked to shrink to fit the space they're given. At 9:17 a.m. on a quiet Thursday, I received a text from Rahim. "We're there. All systems live, nothing broken." I didn't reply with emojis. I walked to the center of our office, took a breath, and said aloud to the small group in the room, "Congratulations, we just did what they told us couldn't be done." No applause, just a few nods, because the goal had never been applause. The goal was ownership. That afternoon, we received our first request from a government-backed infrastructure firm in the UAE, then a manufacturing logistics provider in Germany, then a telecommunications vendor in Canada. We weren't reaching anymore. We were being pulled. Meanwhile, Venturon was bleeding relevance. Their LinkedIn page had gone from "We're proud to launch" to "We're reimagining leadership priorities." No likes, no comments, just quiet reshuffling of the same chairs in the same room. Jenna forwarded me another internal memo that someone from legal had quietly passed along. Effective immediately, Venturon Technologies will be pausing international onboarding efforts to recalibrate post-Trident. Recalibrate was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. Here's your fact for the night. In enterprise tech, pause almost never means regroup. It means retreat. And no one was chasing them, because the partners they once claimed were no longer waiting to be claimed. They were already home, with us. Around 3 p.m., I received a message through our encrypted feedback portal. No name, just a comment. "I used to sit across from you in 27F. I saw everything. They were wrong. You were never too much. They were too small." I stared at it for a long time, not because I needed the validation, but because sometimes it's good to be reminded that the people who watched you break also watched you build. At 6:45 p.m., I stood in the middle of our office. The sun dipped behind the skyline again, the same view I had watched 1,000 times before from glass towers that didn't belong to me. But now the view was mine. No acting VP, no shadowing trip, no under consideration, just Marin Blake, CEO. It still felt surreal, but not like a dream. More like justice on a delay. That night, I sent one last email, this time to the entire Travant team. Subject: "This is the beginning." Message body: "They built a machine that erased its builders. We built a home that remembers its architects. The next chapter starts now, on our terms." Simple, true, and unshakably ours. At 7:45 a.m. the next morning, I stepped into Travant headquarters alone. The halls were quiet, not with emptiness, but with readiness. The kind of quiet that comes before a launch, not the kind that comes after a loss. The walls were soft cream, sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, and on the far side of the main hallway, freshly mounted in brushed steel, was a plaque. It read, "Travant, founded by Marin Blake." Not hidden in footnotes, not wedged into the footer of a press release, not spoken through someone else's voice. It was there, permanent, unedited, visible. I ran my fingers across the metal, just once, not to check if it was real, to confirm that I was. Because for too long I had been spoken about, summarized in third-person narratives, reduced to bullet points and budget lines. Now I was writing the headline myself, and the building spoke for me. Upstairs, the boardroom didn't look like Venturon's. No chrome edges, no sterile fluorescence, no invisible hierarchy masked in language like alignment and stakeholder value. It was warm. Oak table, pale stone walls, light that softened, not silenced. At the far end of the room sat Linda from Eurocom, cross-referencing a rollout timeline with Raheem. Luis appeared on the wall monitor from Sao Paulo, his tie gone, his sleeves rolled up, sipping something too dark to be tea. Yuki had sent 3 bonsai trees as a gift, one for each region. Jenna placed one by the window with a grin. He said, "They live slowly, but they last longer than almost anything." Appropriate. Everyone spoke quietly, with confidence, not urgency, because we weren't scrambling to protect someone else's illusion anymore. We were building what should have been built the first time. This wasn't vengeance. It was stability, reclaimed. At 11:22 a.m., I received a news alert on my phone. Breaking. Mallory Hart steps down from corporate advisory role. No formal statement, no legacy tribute, no interview circuit, just a line at the bottom of the article. Sources say Venturon is undergoing a shift in leadership following the collapse of multiple enterprise partnerships. No one asked where she went, because no one remembered what she'd actually done. At 1:04 p.m., another notification buzzed. Grayson Hart, removed from Venturon's advisory board, effective immediately. No scandal, no denials, just disappearance. The same way they tried to make me vanish. But here's the difference. When they erased me, no one defended it. When I left, the clients followed. When they left, no one did. I didn't cheer, didn't uncork a bottle, didn't send a victory tweet, because none of this was about winning some imaginary game. This was about restoring balance to a field that had mistaken power for permission for far too long. Later that afternoon, I signed the consolidated contract for the Trident integration. 3 partners, 7 years, 1 shared infrastructure, all under our roof, not theirs. I paused before signing, just for a second. Not to savor it, to mark it, because for the first time, I was signing as exactly who I was, with no disguise, no gatekeepers, no borrowed voice. Marin Blake, CEO, a name not spoken for me, but spoken by me. And if you've ever been cut out of a room you helped build, if you've ever watched someone else receive applause for something you bled over in silence, then you understand what that signature really meant. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't glory. It was reclamation. And once you reclaim something no one thought you'd get back, you don't give it away again. The room is quiet now. The papers are signed. The glass doors are closed. But the air still hums, soft and certain. You can feel it if you sit still long enough. A kind of warmth that doesn't come from applause or spotlight. It comes from knowing, finally, that you no longer need someone else's permission to be seen. Marin's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens when the foundation beneath you crumbles and you choose to build a better one, brick by silent brick. No fire, no fight, just focus. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is no revenge at all, just persistence, execution, presence. They tried to write her out, but she rewrote the story in a language they never learned to read, clarity. If you're listening to this now and you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever watched your work get reshaped into someone else's credit, your name slip off the meeting invite, your voice echo in a room that stops hearing it, know this. You're not gone. You're not defeated. You're becoming. And when the time comes, don't scream. Just walk back in, calm and whole, and take your place. Because the table remembers who built it, even if the people at it don't. Now take a deep breath. Let the lights fade. Let the noise drop away. And when you wake up tomorrow, know that your silence tonight wasn't nothing. It was the beginning of something only you can finish.